Hi, good morning. Welcome to the 10th episode of the GitHub OCTO speaker series. OCTO looks at the future of software development and investigates ways to make development faster, safer, easier, and more accessible. In this speaker series, we invite guests to help us look into that future, people with a unique perspective on tools for thinking and the craft of software. And there's probably no more ubiquitous tool for thought than the notebook. Long before computers, thoughts were organized in notebooks. The messy process of discovery was cataloged in notebooks. The notebook as a construct occupies the spot closest to software that isn't software, a place for creators to get their ideas out of their heads so that they can evaluate them, spot connections, and enable others to follow in their footsteps. When I think about it, I'm not exactly sure what to label as the first modern software notebook. IPython was the first REPL that I saw that unlinked the presentational aspects of a notebook from the backend, which executed the code that I wrote. And when I look at most notebook UXs today, they're all to some degree derivative of the IPython or the Jupyter notebook. I have cells, and I can use them to write text or code, and the output of running those cells can include graphics. In some senses, any REPL is a kind of notebook. So one key property of software notebooks is in the tight feedback loop and asking questions and immediately seeing answers. But the second property, and maybe the more interesting one nowadays, is that notebooks are shareable artifacts. I can show it to another person and download some of my thoughts into their brains. And this is where the exciting developments are happening in the space. So today, I'm super thrilled to welcome Melody Meckfessel, CEO of Observable, to the speaker series. If you haven't seen Observable, it's on the cutting edge of notebooks. It's JavaScript-ish based in terms of its the language that it affords you to write in. But because it runs in the browser, it makes it very, very easy to create visualizations, to work with data, and to tell stories, and to share those stories with others. And a lot of the work that they're doing now is in sort of figuring out how to take this sort of notebook UX that Jupyter forged or blazed a trail in and take it into the future, make it multiplayer, make it more accessible. We are taking questions as usual in this OCTO discussion thread, so please absolutely jump in and ask questions. And I'll remind everybody that we have a code of conduct and we take it seriously. Please be kind and welcoming. And with that, hello, Melody.
Hi.
Welcome to the OCTO speaker series.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thanks
so
much for coming and sharing. Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing all about data visualization in notebooks through the lens of the work that you're doing at Observable and in general.
Great.
And seeing Observable abused into a role as a presentation software. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I will give a caveat. I will be using Observable for this entire discussion. So what you're seeing is an expression of the notebook that you just mentioned. So
fantastic.
Great.
What's the new phrase? Not eat the dog food, but drink the champagne.
There you go. There you go. We do that a lot at Observable. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing a bit about how visualization helps us as humans and people think and work. And so my name is Melody. I lead Observable with my co-founder and friend, Mike Bostock. Mike has done some pretty cool things in the visualization space. Namely, he created D3 in collaboration with the community, which is an open source visualization framework. Just had its 10-year birthday/anniversary in February. And I'm super grateful to work with the entire team at Observable. I worked at Google for a number of years, worked at startups and enterprise companies on the software development side. And one of the things that really intrigued me at Google was just the ability to work at scale around data with software developers that were using the services. You know, just billions, large numbers of data. And, you know, if we think about open source collaboration that's happening in the world, it's connecting millions of developers and collaborators. but it all revolves around source code. And we know that we don't make business decisions by staring at a screen and staring at source code. We make those decisions by looking at data. And I believe if we could work with data in a way that's transparent and collaborative and connected to our environments, we can dramatically increase our ability to understand the world around us and to share that understanding with each other and with many of our teams. So Observable, it's a place where you can explore data and think with code. We do that in a notebook. It's a live reactive JavaScript program. I think the very interesting thing that is happening is the community development around visualization. And I believe that visualization is an essential tool for software development. So all of the examples I'm going to show you today are from the Observable community. So you're going to see code, you're going to see data. And I really hope that you walk away with an understanding of how data visualization impacts how we think and how we work as people. And I also just a little bit hope that you start to think about ways that you can bring that into your life and into your work. So as a kid growing up, it's funny, we talk about the physical notebook that we write notes in, and we do analysis and we work through our ideas. I used to love to spend time at the library as a kid. This is a photo from the National Archives, and it just filled me with wonder just to be able to read and learn and explore. And I think it's one of the main reasons that I got into computers and computer science and software development, to be able to create something, to be able to explore the world. And many years later, I remember walking into the first data center and seeing all of these computers and all of the sort of physical expression of the machines and the network equipment and the hardware, and just the amount of data that was being generated by the world's software. And so it just reminded me of the scenes from The Matrix of like just kind of blowing your mind about the explosion of data in the world. So yes, data, there's just way too much of it. And we can't decouple the rise of software from the rise of data. They're interconnected. We have to explore different formats. We have to understand them. The environments for managing data are becoming more complex. We have on-premise data within companies, and we have it in the cloud in different formats. And the solutions that we need to wrangle that data are also increasing. You talked about the different languages that we, different tool sets that we need to pick to do the task that we're trying to do with the data. So from the last GitHub Octoverse report, which was incredible, lots of great insights there, 56 million developers in the world, increasing to 100 million by 2025. And those are astounding numbers. I mean, you can look at analyst report and see that software development's the #1 job. But I think what I would offer is that these are all the folks, we're at the root of this explosion in data, and it's ever increasing. And it's not just software developers, right? There's a tremendous amount of diversity of people involved in exploring and analyzing and making sense of data. The people identify as developers, data scientists, analysts, decision makers, collaborators, entrepreneurs, students, teachers. All of these folks work together and collaborate. And as software development is becoming more ingrained in all these workforces, it's more so than ever. And this is increasing because software development is becoming more accessible, and it's an essential part of everything that we do. So I like formulas. I like to apply formulas. Here's a simple one for you, which is, okay, if there are 56 million developers in the world and they're increasing, we have to work together, right? Most of the software in the world was, it's either open source or it's built on open source. So we're collaborating more around that software, and that can lead to complexity. So let's not underestimate our role in adding to the complexity in data and software. But this complexity, it hurts us in multiple dimensions. It hurts us in terms of correctness. So the software is not doing what we want it to do, which can lead to not so interesting data outcomes. It can be unstable, it can be buggy, it can be insecure. You can look at pretty serious events that happen when we don't understand what our software is doing. And it slows us down in terms of dependencies. As our projects grow, as our dependencies grow, it's difficult for us to make sense and to sort of wrap our heads around it. I love this quote by Nancy Levinson. We are attempting to build systems that are beyond our ability to intellectually manage. So this is our cognitive ability to understand what we're building. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in this for us to just take a pause and think about if we don't do something about how we can improve our understanding of data and of the world, the complexity will keep overwhelming us. And, cost is a tricky thing. Like, it doesn't happen all at once. We know this. It creeps up on us over time. And, I just think about going out in the sunshine and feeling the warmth of the sun as a, just human experience. But you don't feel that sunburn until it's too late. Right. And I think that's true of the software that we're building and having to manage. So for me, thinking about visualization, I always have to start with the people that are exploring the data to get to that visualization. And it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy to do software development in the environment that we're in. But then having to interact with data and with code together to make sense out of it, it can be overwhelming. It can be confusing. There's so much urgency in the world to understand and make decisions based on data. And what you can see within different companies is this fragmentation happening. Like, when people feel a sense of urgency, what can happen is that they start to come up with their own metrics on the data. We start to lose things like data governance, coming up with competing systems within companies to make sense of data. And all of these behaviors that people have, the intention is to gain the insights and to make the decisions, but the behaviors is that actually that urgency creates, can create fragmentation. And that's not good, because we lose that connection with the data and our understanding of it. So, this quote, the power to understand and predict the quantities of the world should not be restricted to those, now those here are people, with the freakish knack of manipulating abstract symbols, which is really computer science and software development. And my main point here is that this understanding of data, our ability to explore and analyze data, should not be limited to a select few number of people. Everyone has to be empowered to interact with data, from software, from applications, about the world and about ourselves. So, but first we need to talk about how we're doing all of this. So if we understand the challenges and we as humans have as it relates to data, and visualization is a way out of this confusion and being overwhelmed for us, we have to first look at the environment that we're interacting with. I mean, the web, right? May be silly, but it has changed everything about how we communicate and connect and are influenced by each other. We're live, we're connected, we can run code with one click, and we can share it with anyone out there. JavaScript, Octoverse, I think 11 million JavaScript developers in the world, most popular language on the web and increasing. It makes interactivity possible. It makes the ability for us to explore and analyze data possible. And there are a lot of options out there around data programming and visualization, but I think JavaScript plays an important role and will continue to. And coding with data, I mean, so it's complicated. There are multiple languages out there. There's lots of tools for us to choose from. The ecosystem is moving very quickly, and there's a lot to keep up with. So we definitely have our challenges in front of us as we try and explore data and bring visualization to it. But I do think there is this like trifecta of amazing improvements in the browser using JavaScript and the web that come together. And it's this combination right now at this point in time in software development and in the world that makes data exploration and data viz possible in the browser. And it gives us all this ability to explore and create together, to collaborate in notebooks, in the browser, and to see each other's work and to be able to communicate more effectively to get to those better decisions. So you have that trifecta, and then here comes, visualization libraries on top of that, things like D3 and other tools for building dynamic data visualization. And it has led to this renaissance in information visualizations on the web in the last decade. It's brought the power of data exploration out into the world, and it's closed this loop for us of the environment that we're in to be able to make sense out of data together. I think it's empowered a lot of people, millions of people in the world, to gain more insights by having these libraries available. Now, they're not, it's not easy. You have to do the work, but I think we all can be part of making this combination of work that we do on the web, in the browser, using JavaScript and or other languages, and using the libraries themselves to help ourselves do this work. So I believe visualization is a tool for thinking for all of us. And it's a means to an end, but that means is the insight that we gain. We can use visualization to generate ideas, to improve our research and our creation. We can use visualization to explain things, to support how we learn and how we teach. And through it, we gain the insights to make the better decisions. And there's kind of this path of like, there's the data that we're exploring. We collaborate on that data in order to communicate and then to drive change from that, to drive positive change and improvements from that. So, but the bright, shiny thing at Observable, we may call it the bright, shiny thing, the viz itself, or maybe it's the squirrel that, the thing that's out there that we can pay attention to. But let's talk a little bit about the data science process itself. Like, why do we do this whole process? I mean, visualization's kind of, it can be the thing at the end, right? It can also be the expression and the exploration along the way. So we do this process, right? To understand, to collaborate, to communicate, to drive change. But we form a question or a hypothesis, and then we use the data to test it through statistics and through that visualization. And it's a very iterative process, just like software development. Each iteration involves transformation, it involves modeling, it involves the visualization of the data. And it's that iteration that drives the creative process. Our goal through this entire process is a new understanding. If most of the time when we're looking at data, we don't actually know what we're looking for at the beginning, and we have to make it up as we go along. In order to support that creativity, we need expressiveness, and that expressiveness comes through writing code for those tasks. So we can't just focus on the visualization. We actually need to engage in the entire process of analysis and data wrangling and exploration, and how the visualization assists in that. But today, the data science process, it's in many cases very siloed. It's a different tool set than software we're using as software developers. And a lot of times it can look like throwing things over the wall and shipping static content. So losing the interactivity and losing the iteration that happens in this process. I don't know about you. I loved choose your own adventure stories as a kid. And I think it's very applicable to data exploration and visualization, where we all get to decide on the paths that we take through the data. And it's plural, right? We take multiple paths through the data, and we reach these decision points in terms of where we're going to go next and what question we're going to ask next and how that gets expressed through the visualization. So visualization offers us an opportunity to move beyond the terminal and the static text, that source code that's in front of us, to have more ways to collaborate and more ways to ask those really tough questions of the data. So that's a little bit about how we think. I want to talk next about how visualization helps us in our work. So I'm going to share some examples now from in the software development space, how visualization helps. And then I'm going to share a couple of customer, kind of more businessy examples of how visualization can be used to help people connect and make better decisions. So, we can use visualization in our own software development in just about anything. I really believe this. And I would encourage you to think about creating data viz and data exploration just as another flavor of software development, right? So we may identify as a back-end developer, front-end developer, full stack. Data viz is another type of software development. We're writing code to interact with data. So I'm going to show you a bunch of examples just to kind of maybe inspire you to think about it. A lot of these are GitHub centric, so I hope they'll resonate. This is an observable notebook that's embedded in the notebook that I'm showing you to explore how code is organized. And you can kind of zoom back, and this is for Observable Standard Library, but you can kind of just visually look at this and see, oh, okay, like I can kind of get the relationships that exist in this code, and maybe spend some time exploring and learning, and then maybe have some questions. Maybe I'm trying to think, I'm going to go write another piece of code here, and this is going to help me be more effective. Or maybe you don't want to look at it as that force-directed graph, but maybe you want to look at it as a collapsible tree, where you can, this is a simple example, but maybe you want to be able to explore in a different way. And that's how you visually can understand the code base more effectively. Maybe you want to look at file sizes and you want to explore. And so you can start to bring some interactivity. I'll just go back to the top level and see the relative sizes of the code tree and kind of drill down and take a look and understand what's there and learn to be more effective, maybe at the next piece of code that you're going to go write. Or maybe you want to see it in file size bubbles. There's just so much diversity and expression here that we can bring to our understanding of code that can inform our work in so many, I think, really interesting ways that take us beyond that kind of flat text on a screen. This one I think is really cool. It's showing the relationships between code. So you can see these edges here for imports between source and target. So if I was looking at this, I'm like, oh, wow, look at all of these relationships around the data classes. Well, that makes sense. But maybe I'm going to, am I going to make some code changes there? Maybe I'm going to think twice about what I'm going to do when I get into that code. And maybe I can see there's some areas which are pretty independent and isolated. But maybe, I'm asking questions with my team around new pieces of code we're going to write, refactoring to make the code better. And this visualization is going to help us have that discussion and start that collaboration. So a lot of things that you can do, like visualizing integration tests or looking at how code throughput and the rate of changes. This is an example from someone in the community of some pull request analysis and showing those visualizations over issues and time, which is pretty cool. It's kind of like there aren't any limits. It's really about what you want to do and the types of questions you want to ask. So I'm going to, this is a visualization around the D3 code contributions. And you can kind of, let me go back here if you can see this. And then I'm going to press play. And this was a while ago. Oh, what's happening, Melody? Okay. It seems like the notebook may have crashed, but real-time demos, it shows a graph of contributions. Let me just see if I can get it back. See, demo real-time. Let me see if I can, there we go. Let me see if it'll come back. Thank you in advance for your patience. Okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. This is D3 over time. You can see the year and things start to really, okay, whoa, look at that. Look at all the contributors and you can start to see, just the different contributions. So there's a lot of really fun ways to do this, to understand what's happening in the code base. And that can inform us when we're, trying to make decisions about what we're going to do with the code. So here's another Brett Victor quote. which I think summarizes it for software development for me. People understand what they can see. If a programmer can't see what a program is doing, she can't understand it. And I think that's where the power of visualization can come into our software development. We have these questions about our code. We have questions about dependencies we take. We have questions about how to make things better. How can we use visualization to do that? It's super powerful. And an example of that can be when we look at, how algorithms run, and just actually observe it, and maybe in some way have new insights around what decisions we want to make in the software that we're writing. So let me just show you a couple of customer examples in terms of using visualization to make better decisions and kind of collaborate. And I think it does when we're having to interact with data together, and it changes how we work and it changes how we collaborate. So people come together to work in teams and they have very different roles: data scientists, data analysts, developers. What we want to do is break down the walls to enable all those people to collaborate more effectively. So let's look at a couple different examples. Stitch Fix, clothing service, recommendation service, big in data science. I'm not a big shopper, so it's awesome. Get clothes delivered. What they did was they brought together different roles in the notebook to give more autonomy and to increase the speed at which they were making decisions. So they created notebooks, and they were able to iterate on their models and tweak and visualize it, and then share it broadly within the organization. So they kind of broke down those walls in the garden that was separating people from collaborating. Trace, which is trying to just increase productivity within their organization. They were using notebooks. This is actually from their public website, to do analysis on different areas of the business and stitch together different visualizations to decide on just decisions that they were making across multiple parts of the organization. Sumivant, which is a bio pharmaceutical company, was trying to not just make better decisions, but reduce cost of operations. And so they felt like by bringing different people of different skill sets together in the notebook against their own secure private data, they were able to be more effective and empower more people. This is an example of them looking at how they connect. You can kind of see it here, connect with the right patients for the projects that they were working on. And they were able to have this level of autonomy that enabled them to move much, much faster than before. So, this was the hierarchical edge bundling one that I showed you, which was more on a software structure. Well, this is being applied to people and decisions that they were making around connecting with the right people that were in their business. So it's pretty cool to see the different applications that you can bring to visualizations. And again, like all of this is with the intention that we have more insights through those visualizations. We're able to make more sense of it because of the visual aspects of understanding the data. And that leads to better communication, decision-making, and hopefully improving the human experience. So that's a little bit about visualization, how it helps us think, how it helps us work, but how about how it helps us collaborate? So if we know that there are more developers in the world that have to collaborate, and the complexity is a natural outcome, it can be pretty easy for us then to spend all of our time on technical matters. If we're balancing the churn, we're trying to figure things out, that can take all of our energy. And I would offer that we need to check ourselves and challenge ourselves to stay focused on the insights and on thinking. Are we asking the right questions of the data? Is this the right data to be looking at? What are we trying to understand together? And if there are more of us now, how do we shift our behavior to help find those answers together? So I don't know, I was big into drama back in the day. And I had a drama teacher who really wanted us to use improv. And something recently struck me about improv. There's 2 rules of it. You have to agree. You don't have to agree. You have to acknowledge. Maybe I should say you have to acknowledge. You have to say yes. And then you add to, which is the and. So it's the simple yes and. And I think there's so many similarities between improv and software development, whether it's proprietary software or open source. This idea of how are we in flow with each other? How do we bring creativity and positivity and fun and not have to go it alone? So I pulled this from the GitHub website. This is a pull request flow. And I just want to offer, like, we still spend so much of our time in software and in data exploration coding alone. So we write the pull request, right? And of course we send it out for review and we solicit input, but a lot of that is still asynchronous interactions. And that async sort of sending and waiting is really challenging when it comes to working with data, because there's a lot of latency there, and it's hard to get in flow with someone when we have these sort of back and forths. So I don't know if you're familiar. There's imposter syndrome. There's kind of different expressions or ways of talking about that. One of the imposter syndrome sort of personas is called the soloist. This was definitely my default in software development, and this idea that you have to do it all on your own. And I think actually, if you look at the workflow around software development, it actually reinforces this. So while we're working on that PR alone, our teammates help with that, but you have this sort of ping pong of waiting, and it reinforces that you got to do a lot of the work on your own. So how do we come out of that? And we come out of that by building shared experiences together, creating things together. This Brene Brown, I'm a big fan. Trust is a product of vulnerability that grows over time and requires work, attention, and full engagement. And, okay, so if we don't do the async back and forth, and we try and come up with a process that supports our creativity, even pairing and real-time collaboration can be super intimidating because we are making mistakes in the presence of someone else. And there's so much vulnerability in creating with someone else. And I think we need to find another way. We need to find a way to normalize that software development and data exploration and data viz as a way of developing software is really messy. And we are humans and we are messy. And I think it could be pretty amazing to normalize that. So this is a clip of some multiplayer editing that happens in the notebook where, really we can kind of watch our teammates' avatars as they're just writing code and as they're communicating. And you kind of can get this mind meld that happens where you're like, oh, okay, like we're going to go do that together. And then if you take that to data, writing code together to explore data, and you can see the impact of your code and interacting with the data real time in the data viz, and riff and make mistakes together and just keep iterating. I mean, this is a visualization around weather, but it's, you can apply it to anything. It's pretty cool to be able to sit together, especially in the world that we're in now, where remote collaboration is so important, to be able to do this together and to be with each other in this way. So improv, the beauty of yes and, we have the ability to literally create things out of nothing with the other people that we work with in software development. And I think all that creativity can come out in our exploration of data and our creation of data visualization if we can get over our own intimidation and tap into creativity for ourselves and for other people. And I think this is the way of open source software development, right? Build it, put it out there, someone sees it, someone gets value out of it, they add to it. And I think at the root of this is with data visualization is really finding ways that we can change the frequency that we as people connect and create together. So I want to show a couple of examples of how, data visualization is leading to more data storytelling. And we can use visualization to tell stories about our world. We are members of a global community, and we can contribute to areas that impact all of us. We are all consuming and understanding data, and visualizations make a lot of that possible. And I think the good news is that we're more empowered than ever before to share our insight and stories in the browser, on the web, the insights that we have with each other. So I wanted to share a couple of different examples. This was one that was created on Observable. It's looking at the coronavirus reopening. It's a heat map across a bunch of different counties. It was done by the LA Times data desk. But, and I think it's pretty profound to see the number of data visualizations that have happened around the coronavirus, which affect all of us. And now, looking at reopening and things changing, there's a way that visualization can communicate data pretty quickly and effectively. This is a data visualization to track legislation that's anti-trans to raise awareness. And you can actually kind of scroll through and see data that's publicly available. And, if we didn't create the visualization around it, maybe perhaps we wouldn't know some of this information. So let me get down to here. This is another example of looking at racial demographic data from the census and trying to look at it over time. Using different tools to bring together D3 census data. I think this one's using Mapbox as well. This is another visualization that is looking at sea level changes and the impact to the world. And it's just kind of like mind-blowing to be able to see the expression of this data in a visualization around climate change. And I think there was one more that I wanted to show. Yeah, this was one that was done for Women's History Month, looking at the analysis of Nobel Prize winners and some interesting questions to ask around looking at this data and looking at the reason behind it. So, I think we can apply visualization to how we think. We can apply it to how we work as software developers and as developers that collaborate with many other people. And we can actually, for our own interest, use visualization to explore areas that we care about, whether it's social justice or finance or fitness or health or gaming. There's this beautiful partnership between data exploration and visualization that for us as people, it's consumable by a broad, diverse audience. And we're in a position at this point in time to make it available and to put it out there in the world. So with that, I want to share a couple of closing thoughts. Challenges, yes, there are many, right? We know that data is not information. We have to do a lot of work to transform it, to make it meaningful. And most of our time in visualization is spent on the data. We have to think about the visual channels. Some of them are less effective. We have to think about color, and we have to do the work. We also have to think about the tools that we need to do the task at hand. We can't just, wave a magic wand. Like doing this takes time. And the good news is we can do it together. Visualization helps us see and understand information in really new ways. It taps into our visual system, our eyes. It can help improve our confidence. We can see trends and we can discover surprises, and we can more easily communicate with each other. So it's just really not surprising that visualization is playing this role in the charts and graphs and the maps that we use to make sense out of the world. It's helping us to ask really good questions and identify patterns. And data really is the foundation of most things in our connected world. And I believe that working with data is an essential skill that we're all going to need to have, whether we're a developer or a data scientist or a hobbyist. I mentioned earlier this idea of feedback, and you saw that example of being able to get this feedback quickly to make decisions real time. We know that when we're writing code, if there's a tight loop in the iteration, we get to the insights much faster. So it helps us learn and it helps us move on to the next thing that we're going to do. And we're stronger together than we are alone, right? The explosion of software and what's happened in open source, our ability for anyone to learn and share from each other, to fork that example, all that creativity happens when we work together. And I think the power of making data available is just like, we have to come back to how we help each other, how we share techniques and tools and insights. And I'm really inspired by what's happening in the data visualization community. We have to empower everyone to collaborate, not just coders, not just the experts, but everyone. And we need to make it available. Share what we've created. Do it directly in a notebook or in a piece of code that you're writing. And that helps us all be more informed about the data. I think it's more fun. I don't know, maybe I'm biased, like working by yourself with some code. Like, I think we can be inspired by each other, whatever our skill level is. We can build on each other's work. We can learn from each other. And I think there's this beautiful network effect that happens that we all benefit from. And we do that in community, right? We do that in the communities that we're in. And we have such an amazing opportunity. Our brains, time, they're finite. I think we should make best use of them. And I think we do that together, especially around visualization. So I think I would just encourage you to think about how you can bring visualization to how you think about the world, to your work, and hopefully that you do it together, share what you know, and connect with others around the power of data visualization. So thank you for listening, and I hope you will take a moment to check out Observable. The community is super inspiring, creating some amazing visualizations, and I think we're going to answer questions.
Fantastic. Melody, that was excellent. And the demo foo worked. It was not there, except for that one moment in the middle.
There's a little refresh
panic.
there.
It's not that one refresh. I think that's a good, low, acceptable like number of refreshes in the middle of a live demo. Fantastic. I've been using Observable and before that RunKit, and before that Jupyter, and before as a means for exploring things. But Observable is I think one of the first platforms that I've seen that is actively trying to push the notebook format forward. You talk about these notebooks as tools for sharing, for both iterating, like, the solo work that we do alone, yeah, but also the turning around and sharing it with other people. And one of the most interesting things that jump out to me about the sharing aspect is that Observable made conscious choices to break or change how notebooks execute, for example, in service of making it easier. Because one of the common trip ups that I would have, and everybody has with IPython notebooks, is that the cell order from top to bottom, not necessarily the order in which the cell's executed. Yeah. And Observable said, you know what? Anytime something changes, anything that depends on that cell will automatically re-execute. And that was a difference. So I think one of the sort of deepest questions I have about notebooks and the future of notebooks is how do you think the notebook UX in general needs to evolve, both to make it more accessible to others and to make it better than that? I think right now we're all still sort of doing notebooks with a REPL accent, because that's sort of like what it grew out of. We're doing television like it was radio, What would a native future for notebooks look like? I know this is kind of a woolly question, but like, where does this thing need to grow or change so that more people can derive value from it?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're right in that data flow in the Observable notebook makes it possible. I mean, we're always compiling in the background, and I had done some research in the past around, what makes developers productive, and staying in flow is like one of the biggest things. Like whenever you have to wait for compile time or you have to wait for feedback to go debug the error that you encountered, you get out of flow. And so there is something magical in the observable notebook functioning kind of like a spreadsheet, in that you're getting that immediate feedback and you're able to debug. I think there's a lot of opportunity to, if you think about the process of data viz, there's a lot of little things that you need along the way when you're exploring data and when you're bringing the visualization together. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement in how we help creators, whatever their background may be, to find those little snippets of like helpers that they can bring into their data viz. And I don't think it has to be purely like UI. Like I think we can stay in code. We want to stay in code essentially to keep that expressiveness going so that we don't have to hit a wall in our work. And I also think there's this opportunity to help ourselves and each other build on each other's work by having reusable components. I think there's a lot of people are using imports. There's so many different ways that this is coming into being. So that's one aspect of kind of bringing more reusability, more discovery into the notebook as you're creating and trying to get that job done. The other aspect that I would say is that there's a lot to learn around interacting with data, wrangling data, and creating the visualization. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the notebook environment to help folks learn in the context of the job that they're trying to get done. And I'd like to see that improve, because if we sort of believe that exploring data and creating visualizations is an essential skill for humans, for people, then how can we make that more accessible and approachable to a diverse audience where it's not just limited to the experts? It's not just limited to the people. I mean, more people are learning JavaScript. So I'd like to see both the reusability and the learning aspect continue to evolve and improve in the notebook. I'd love to hear what Amelia thinks.
I totally agree. And I actually had a question running off your answer. First of all, amazing talk. I loved it. I thought it was really insightful. And I want to ask, I've used Observable a lot. I really like how you can reuse, like, so I don't have to start from scratch. Like I want to make this custom data viz, but I can pull in a legend from another notebook or like different pieces. And I think it's gotten really easy to create a really complicated data viz. And I've heard practitioners kind of wary of how easy it's becoming to create data visualizations. And there's a few skills that go into making like a really good data visualization. There's both the skills to actually create it, but there's also like data literacy and data viz design and making sure you're responsibly representing the data.
Yeah.
And so is that something that you all think about at Observable? And do you have any ideas for how to make sure as the skills part gets easier, the like being responsible while representing data part is also represented?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. And thank you for all the work that you do in data viz. It's super inspiring. It's interesting you bring up data literacy. I think about data literacy a lot. Literacy in terms of the availability to learn to read and write, and to do that as it applies to data. There is a lot of responsibility in that. And I think one of the things that I think we want to do at Observable is contribute to how we increase data literacy in the world, but it does come with responsibility. And I think we can do that in collaboration with the community. There's principles of like how you present the data, right? That you can misrepresent it. And I think this is a problem that it's a challenge that we're seeing in the world. How can we assist in that and still support people's creative exploration by making suggestions around, there's some standard data viz principles when you think about, color, and you think about citing sources, and you think about showing the logic that you use to manipulate the data. These are all important practices that I think we can bring into the creative process. And we don't have all the answers, but I think what we do want to do is create that in collaboration with the community, the larger community, the community within Observable and outside of Observable, to make the world better and to make the data viz better. I think what I've seen too in the community, Amelia, is people commenting and people making suggestions along those lines. So if someone is maybe earlier in their journey in data viz, getting help, right? Like getting a suggestion about, hey, did you try this? I use this, I use this bit in my data viz, and it assisted. So yeah, I think those patterns of creating an environment where you build trust and people feel safe to not know how to do it right, but to learn along the way is an important part of what we're trying to do at Observable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that last part is so important of being okay with making mistakes, because I think that it does have a really good community, and people don't tend to get really defensive, but that's usually when like conflict arises.
Yeah. It's a challenge in software, right? Like developers we all have strong opinions.
True.
And we could argue there's a right and wrong way, but really there's a lot of flexibility and creativity in terms of what we bring into it. And so I think what I want on Observable is to build a place that's inclusive and where you can be messy and we can normalize mistakes. When you're pair programming in a notebook, we all see that we don't know it all. And I think there's some beautiful self-reinforcing behavior when we're like witnessing our own mistakes and someone witnessing them and then witnessing their mistakes. It's like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, we're going to figure it out together along the way.
Totally. I think, over the course of my career, every time I've done client work, one of the sort of mantras that I fell back on was always present sketches in pencil, because the medium inherently communicates the unfinished nature of the thing that I'm showing off. If I show polished mock-ups, people are like, oh, it'll be this is mostly baked. It'll be ready next week. But by showing things in pencil, everybody implicitly buys into the fact that this thing is unfinished. It's still a work in progress, that it's okay to adjust and it's okay for it to maybe be wrong. So in some ways, you're talking about Observable as the developer's pencil, a way not just to show off an idea, but to make it okay to say, this is maybe wrong, it's maybe unfinished, it could be better. Please jump in and make marks together with me. But what this sort of carries, the question that it carries right after it is then, how should notebooks be versioned? How should they interact with other versioning software like Git? I know that on GitHub we have a ton of folks that are checking in, the numbers on Jupyter notebooks that are checked into GitHub daily are staggering. People clearly want to not just have the notebook, but also be able to look back over time and see how that notebook evolved. I'm curious sort of what, you're right on the cutting edge of this, what, as collaboration in notebooks grows, and especially as sort of the multiplayer thing that you're building takes off, what does versioning look like in that environment? Or are there any thoughts that you have about that? I'm really curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's especially important for teams that are making business decisions based on the notebook at that point in time. So we do have history, and you can check out history and you can see what people have done, and you can go back and take a look and learn from that. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of being able to save state. There's interactivity that people bring into the notebook. So if you think about, I'm trying to make a business decision around some aspect of my business, and I'm trying to understand the data in a certain region, and I want to bring people into that decision-making process, I can add interactivity to explore the data, sliders, filters, like whatever it might be, to help folks. They don't have to understand, they don't have to view the code, right? They don't have to view the logic. That's optional, but they can explore the data and they can ask interesting questions. And I think there's what I hear in your question is, there's a next evolution that needs to happen with a notebook to save that to save that kind of point in time. Here's the state that we were exploring around this data, because the data is going to evolve and change, right? And we want that. We want that to be a feature, not a bug. And we also want to understand what the inputs were into that decision at a certain point of time. And so what I expect that we'll see in notebooks and what we've been thinking about at Observable is how to make that easy for people of, again, many different roles. Like the exec gets the interactive data viz, right? And they're playing around and trying to make a decision. And the scientists and the developers and the analysts are all providing input. And then the decision gets made. We proceed with that. We may do a postmortem and come back and say, well, okay, like what actually happened? And like, where's the data now? And can we actually like compare and diff the data and the logic at different points in time and understand the impact of our decision? And I think that's going to be really fun to see that next evolution of the notebook to support that, because that's the practical aspect of like, you know, using the viz to have some insight and then making a decision out of it. And we want to have that over time. That's how we learn, is to be able to go back and look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Retaining those sort of snapshots, like you say, sort of the intermediate phases. Like I have data that comes in, I've made some changes to how I display it, but then I want to be able to like refer back to like, you know, what was I thinking at this point in time, is something that that I think is not a solved thing in notebooks, and I'm really curious about sort of how that UX is going to evolve. I don't know,
Yeah.
Amelia, you've done like a ton more with Observable than I have, and with notebooks. I'm curious, sort of, you know, as you sort of spike out things, how do you look back and refer to, you know, like, oh, this was an interesting state, or maybe it's not the whole solution that I want, but like there's one aspect of this that I like. How do you then like track and like refer back to it? Is it just like I'm gonna clone fork the notebook and then just I end up with like fork of notebook one?
Cup of forks, yeah. So there's two things that I really like here. There's history as seeing it at different points in time, but there's also history as a fallback mechanism. So like one of the principles of a good UI is the ability to make mistakes, because then you're not afraid of changing things. So that's another really awesome benefit of keeping the history. So you're like, oh, maybe it should be this way. And then maybe that direction doesn't work out. You can always go back. And then forking, I think, is really good, because I see data viz as neither an art nor a science, which I think, Melody, you hit on earlier. There's no one right answer. It's more, would this help answer our question? Or if we did it in this other format, would that make this one point more clear? So forking really gives you the ability to build out the like basic like data processing and data structure, and then like try out different variations and then load them up side by side and see like experientially which one feels better, which I don't think anyone knows, like no matter how long you've been a data viz practitioner, you don't know which one is going to turn out better, because every data set is different. So that's something that's really important, especially with data viz.
Awesome.
I absolutely do agree with that. And I think that's what makes it fun, honestly. Like there's so many different paths that you can explore, and I think it is fun to do that together.
We're at time. I still have a couple of questions from the audience. Maybe you can give us some quick insights, Melody. One of the questions that folks have asked is, Jess Martin asked, what would it take for observable notebooks to be deployed as part of a production environment? Where's the line between observable and something like a pass, for instance, something like Heroku? Or maybe sort of the more modern analogs like Vercel and Netlify. Like where does observable sit in sort of this spectrum of things?
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects of that. So we're a SaaS, software as a service company. We have folks in the community that will build, web apps in Observable, and then they'll embed them elsewhere. We have a lot of data journalist teams that do that. They do the data viz and then they just embed it in, their news site. And so I think there's a lot. One of the interesting aspects that we think a lot about is that there's a lot of expressiveness. There's a lot that you can do in Observable. And, there's some community members that are pushing very creative, pushing the boundaries of that in terms of serverless notebooks and writing web apps and doing all sorts of things. And I know that on the platform side, there's more work that we need to do to support that. And I think we're trying to really listen to what the community's doing and how we can have a positive impact. And right now, a lot of it has to do with data viz and data exploration. And I think there's a lot of applications around, deploying notebooks in production that I think will be fun to see over time. And I'll be really interested to talk about how we support that in the community. So yeah.
Okay. And another question from Paulo Kayak. Is there any plan to let observable users code in other languages that compile to JavaScript, like TypeScript or ClojureScript? I think that's something that's very popular sort of theme. I'm sure you're tired of the TypeScript question by now.
No, I think, we're really committed to JavaScript, and also we want to meet people where they are in data viz. So I think, language preference and applicability of language for the task that you're trying to get done with the frameworks that you're doing. It's really important to pay attention to that, because I think we have to plan for the ecosystem and the frameworks to change over time and to evolve. And we want to, just like we're agnostic from the visualization framework or the web library that you may need to use at the task. I want Observable to be a place that really integrates and supports what makes you productive. So I think we'll keep paying attention. We'll keep listening. We'll be open. We're pretty committed to JavaScript right now, but yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I see a response. Well, TypeScript is JavaScript, but yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Yeah.
Extremely helpful inference. It's true. Helpful. If I think about, what do I want in a notebook, it's I want the notebook to autocomplete everything for me. And there's something very nice about working in TypeScript code bases where it's like I type 2 or 3 characters and then bam, that's it. The editor does the rest for me.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Melody, thank you so much for coming on. There's still a couple of open questions in the discussion thread, which I will helpfully pop the banner up for.
Yeah, I'm happy to help answer offline too. And
exactly.
Share some of the notebooks that I walked through today.
Folks, if you still have questions, then please drop that in. Melody, we received a couple of asks if you can share the Observable notebook that was your deck. So maybe also throw that into the discussion link and let other people experience the joys of hitting refresh once in a while. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us and sharing your experience and telling this story and framing sort of the purpose of this tool and where it's going for us. And thanks, Amelia, so much for joining us for Q&A.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you, Amelia. I love your work. And thank you for having me. It's great to be here today.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks everyone. See you next time.